Chapter 15. Danger on the Ice. The next day, after lessons with Mama, Caroline told Lydia and Rhonda to head home without her. "I'll be along shortly," she promised. "I need to see the blacksmith." She found Joseph working at his forge, shaping hot iron into a tool. "Excuse me," Caroline said, staying a safe distance from the forge as Papa had taught her. "Might I borrow some cartwheel rims?" She pointed toward one of the shop's dim corners, which was cluttered with all sorts of stray metal pieces and tools. Joseph laid down his hammer. "Whatever for?" "Lydia and Rhonda and I want to have hoop races," Caroline explained. "I've got two small ones," Joseph says. "You're welcome to borrow them." Caroline collected the two narrow iron rims, each about waist high, and headed for home. "We need 3 hoops," she thought, "or it won't be any fun." She tried to think. Suddenly she smiled. She knew where there was another hoop. When she got home, Caroline headed for the family storeroom, where Grandmother's spinning wheel sat among traveling trunks and old pieces of furniture. Grandmother hadn't had any wool to work with in months, so the spinning wheel was dusty. It was made almost entirely from wood, but it had a narrow iron rim to hold the wheel together. The unheated storeroom was so cold and dry that the wooden wheel had shrunk a little. When Caroline pulled on the iron rim, it easily slid from the wheel. She grinned. Perfect. With the hoop in hand, Caroline hurried down the stairs and joined the other girls. "I've got 3 hoops," she said triumphantly. "We're all set." Once they left home, Caroline led the way down the lane, away from the busiest streets. With so many new ships and forts and storehouses being built, men had cut trees all around the village. Logs, planks, and bricks were piled here and there, ready for work crews. The girls took a footpath out of the village and soon arrived at a quiet, sloping meadow. "See," Caroline said, her breath puffing white in the cold air. "There's a nice crust on the snow." Lydia considered the slope. "We won't be able to run aside our hoops in the snow," she said. "I thought we could launch the hoops from the top of the hill," Caroline said. "We can all send our hoops down at the same time. The first hoop to reach the bottom is the winner," she pointed. The gentle slope stretched down to the lake shore, but a fallen tree at the bottom, now covered with snow, would keep the hoops from rolling onto the ice. "That's a good idea," Rhonda agreed. She pulled her scarf more tightly around her neck. "Oh, that wind is chilly. I wish the sun were out today." "We'll stay warm as long as we keep moving," Lydia promised. "Let's line up here on the hilltop." The 3 girls positioned their hoops. "Ready?" Rhonda called. "Go!" Caroline set her hoop sailing, but it quickly fell over. Keeping a hoop going on the slick slope was tricky. "This is harder than racing hoops on grass," Lydia gasped, as the girls trudged back up the hill after their third try. "I almost had it," Caroline said. "Next time my hoop will surely reach the bottom." "Perhaps," Rhonda said with a teasing smile. "But my hoop is going to beat yours." As Caroline positioned her hoop for the next launch, she paused to enjoy the cold air against her face and the sound of footsteps crunching the snow. Rhonda's cheeks were flushed pink and her eyes sparkled. Lydia laughed as she struggled the last few steps to the starting line. Finally, Caroline thought. She wanted to cheer. This time, Lydia's hoop rolled all the way to the bottom of the hill. It hit the fallen log and fell over. "I win," she crowed. "This time you do," Rhonda informed her, "but Caroline and I will catch up to you." Soon all 3 girls were able to keep their hoops rolling. "Let's start keeping count," Lydia suggested. If your hoop hits that little rise first, you win a point." For some reason, the count stayed close. Each girl had a chance to cheer as her hoop reached the target first. Slowly, though, Caroline fell behind. It doesn't matter, she tried telling herself, but she couldn't help wanting to win, or at least catch up. After coming in last 3 times in a row, she paused at the top of the slope, thinking. She was using the hoop from the spinning wheel, which was not as heavy as the others. Perhaps she just needed to push the hoop harder. Ready? Rhonda called again. Go! Caroline launched her hoop with all her strength. The 3 hoops rolled down the slope faster and faster. Caroline's hoop stayed out in front. I'm going to win this time, she cried. She clapped as her hoop sailed to the bottom. Instead of falling over, though, the hoop kept spinning. It rolled right up the snow mound that covered the log. Then a gust of wind grabbed the hoop, carrying it over the rise and out of sight. Caroline's excitement turned to dismay as her hoop disappeared. The 3 girls stared open-mouthed. My goodness, Rhonda said. They scrambled down the slope and over the log. Caroline stared at the frozen lake. Where's the hoop? She asked. Do you see it? No, Lydia said. Rhonda shook her head. Caroline scanned the ice, looking this way and that. She couldn't see the hoop anywhere. The wind must have taken it a long way, Rhonda said at last. Caroline lifted her chin. Well, then, she said, we need to go out on the lake and look for it. Lydia frowned. Caroline, no. We don't know if the ice is safe here. I can tell if the ice is safe, Caroline protested. No, Lydia said. We're out of sight from the village. We mustn't go out there. Caroline rubbed her mittened hands together anxiously. I can't leave the hoop behind, she told the other girls. It's the rim to Grandmother's spinning wheel. Lydia's eyes went wide. Did you ask permission before taking it? No, Caroline admitted. Do you think Grandmother will be angry with us? Perhaps you should have thought of that before taking her hoop, Lydia said. Honestly, Caroline. Stop scolding me, Caroline burst out. I wouldn't have taken it if you 2 had been more friendly lately. Lydia planted her hands on her hips. This has nothing to do with Rhonda and me. You're the one who took the hoop. Stop it, Rhonda cried. Arguing won't help anything. She looked at Caroline. You'll have to tell your grandmother what you did. The other girl's scolding just made Caroline feel stubborn. What I have to do, she retorted, is find the hoop. It couldn't have gone too far. We're not going on that ice, Rhonda insisted. I agree, Lydia added. Listen, Caroline, we're older than you, and I don't care if you're older than me. Caroline yelled. I know how to read ice. I'm going to look for that hoop whether you like it or not. Lydia and Rhonda exchanged a troubled glance. Are you coming with me? Caroline demanded. She stared at the other girls, daring them to say no. No one spoke. Fine, Caroline said. I'll go by myself. She turned away. Her hands were shaking, and her stomach felt upset. But I can't change my mind now, she thought. She turned her back, straightened her shoulders, and walked onto the ice. Caroline hadn't taken more than 3 steps before Lydia said, Caroline, wait, I'll come with you. Me too, Rhonda said with a heavy sigh. Caroline blew out a long, relieved breath. Thank you, she said with frosty politeness. Looking over the lake, Caroline felt a whisper of unease. Was she doing the right thing? What would Papa think if he could see her now? She thought she was becoming the steady person Papa wanted her to be. She didn't feel that way now. I made a mistake by taking the hoop without permission, Caroline thought. But I'm trying to be responsible and bring it back. That is the right thing to do, isn't it? One thing was certain. She needed to remember everything Papa had taught her about the safety on the frozen lake. She turned and stepped back on the shore. Then she poked among the trees until she found 3 long, stout sticks. She handed one to Rhonda. Carry this so that it's even with the ice, she told Rhonda. Rhonda looked confused. Why? Wind can shift the ice and cause cracks, Caroline explained. Seeing the look of alarm on Rhonda's face, she continued quickly. But you usually have warning. When the ice cracks, it sounds like a pistol shot. If a crack did open in the ice and you fell through, the stick would catch on the ice and keep you from drowning. People hardly ever fall in, Lydia added, but she looked nervous. She took her stick. Let's get started. The girls stepped onto the ice. Caroline peered into the distance until her eyes ached. She could hardly tell where the ice ended and the sky began. Everything looked gray. That hoop has to be out here somewhere, she told herself. At least the ice was good, thick and white. The day was growing colder, though. Wind raced across the lake. Caroline's fingers and toes were soon numb, despite her thick woolen mittens and socks. "We're getting awfully far from shore," Lydia said. "We should turn back." "I see it!" Caroline cried. "It's just ahead." She began to hurry. Suddenly, Lydia yelled, "Stop! The ice is broken up there." Looking up, Caroline saw that they were reaching the end of a solid ice shelf that stretched from shore. The hoop lay near the shelf's edge. Just beyond, big pieces of ice bobbed lightly. Jagged ribbons of open water appeared and disappeared between the cakes of ice as they jostled together. Caroline swallowed hard, trying to read the ice as Papa had taught her. "I still can't get the hoop. I can still get the hoop." "Caroline, do not go any further," Lydia ordered. "I forbid you to take one more step." "I'll be careful," Caroline protested. Rhonda grabbed Caroline's arm. "Don't you dare," she said. "Lydia's right." Caroline clenched her teeth. She was not going to permit Lydia and Rhonda to order her around, not when she was so close to the hoop. "I know what I'm doing," she insisted. "You two stay here. I'm the lightest." Ignoring the other girls' warnings, Caroline began walking forward, step by careful step. She tapped the ice ahead of her with the stick, checking for any sign of weakness. She pushed her hat back, uncovering her ears, even though they prickled with cold. If the ice cracked, she wanted to hear it. One step, then another. One more. Caroline concentrated on her goal. 3 more steps. She was there. Caroline stooped and grabbed the iron hoop. "I have it," she thought triumphantly. As she rose to her feet, an extra sharp blast of wind almost knocked her back down. Then came a deafening crack sound, loud as a gunshot. The ice lurched beneath Caroline's feet. She struggled to keep her balance. "Caroline!" Lydia shrieked. Caroline looked back toward the shore and was horrified to see a narrow channel of water, black and threatening, open between her and the main ice shelf. She stood now on a loose piece of ice about the size of her bedroom floor. "Can you jump over the water?" Rhonda cried. "No," Caroline said fearfully. "The piece of ice is staying balanced because I'm right in the middle of it. If she moved toward the edge, her weight might tip the ice over, and she'd plunge into the freezing water." Lydia and Rhonda began a conversation that Caroline couldn't hear, with lots of pointing and gesturing. Caroline knew that Lydia would keep Rhonda safe. Lydia knew as much about ice as Caroline did. "No, Lydia knows more than I do," Caroline admitted miserably. She'd made a terrible decision. Now she was in a terrible trouble. She tried to think, but her brain felt like slush. Fear made it hard to breathe. What if the wind pushed all those loose pieces further away from land? "Help me," she pleaded, blinking black tears. "I don't know what to do." "Caroline," Lydia called, "crouch down." For once, Caroline was very glad to get an order from her cousin. She obeyed. Lydia continued, "Now stretch out on your stomach." Caroline slowly stretched out on the ice, gasping each time it wobbled beneath her. Despite her thick coat, lying on the ice sent deeper chill into her bones. On the main ice shelf, Lydia lay down in the same manner. Then she inched her way over to the ice toward the crack. Rhonda held on to Lydia's ankles, ready to yank her back if the ice gave way. Lydia stopped when she was near the edge of the ice shelf. Then she extended her stick slowly across the water and over the ice toward Caroline. "Grab the end." Caroline snaked her hand forward and grasped the end of Lydia's stick. "Don't try to pull me over," Caroline begged. "I'll fall into the water." "I'm going to just hang on," Lydia promised, while Rhonda goes for help. Knowing that Lydia was at the other end of the stick made Caroline feel better. At least she wasn't going to drift away. As she watched Rhonda hurry off, Caroline tried to slow her racing heart. Lydia was in a bad spot, too. What if the ice Lydia was laying on broke away as well? "Lydia is risking her own safety to help me," Caroline thought, with a new stab of fear. In fact, both Rhonda and Lydia had taken a great risk when they followed her onto the ice. Caroline felt tears brim over and freeze on her cheeks. She'd made many mistakes that day. No wonder the older girls didn't listen to her ideas. Caroline didn't know how long she lay shivering on the ice, clutching Lydia's stick. before she heard a distant shout. Rhonda appeared on the shore, but she was alone. Caroline's hopes sank. Why hadn't Rhonda brought help? Then she saw that Rhonda was dragging a long plank of wood. I found a board, Caroline heard Rhonda say. Good, Lydia replied. Lay it on the ice and then slide it over the water to Caroline's piece of ice, carefully. Rhonda placed the board on the ice shelf and gently pushed it forward. One end came to rest right beside Caroline. Caroline, Lydia called, we'll hold down this end of the plank so you can walk across. Moving as slowly and steadily as possible, Caroline began to rise to her feet. She had to let go of Lydia's stick so now she could use both arms to help keep her balance. Each time the ice bobbed beneath her, she caught her breath. Finally, she was standing upright. But although the plank rested right beside her boots, she couldn't seem to take a step. Caroline looked at her cousin. What if the plank pushes my cake of ice underwater? It won't, Lydia promised. With a deep breath, Caroline stepped onto the board. It was very narrow. She took one last glance at the hoop. She wanted to grab it, but she was afraid that carrying it might throw her off balance. Caroline began to walk along the plank, placing each foot carefully. Her legs trembled with cold and fright. She waved her hands wildly to keep from falling off the board. When she reached the channel that had opened in the ice, she saw the dark water moving restlessly below her. She froze with terror. If she lost her balance, she'd fall into Lake Ontario. The icy water would soak her heavy clothing, making it impossible for her to swim. Her hands would be too numb to grab Lydia's stick. The older girls wouldn't be able to save her. Almost there, Lydia called. Rhonda added, You can do it, Caroline. Their encouragement gave Caroline the strength she needed to take another step. Keep going, she told herself. Don't stop moving. Don't look down. Just keep going. It seemed to take forever to inch over the open water. Finally, Caroline moved past the channel. She reached the ice shelf. She was safe.